The wine glass shattered on the marble floor the moment Draven Ashford's body hit the table. Elena Voss froze, her hand still stretched out from pouring his cup only seconds before. His face had gone pale, his lips turning a strange shade of blue, and his powerful frame, the frame of the strongest Alpha King in the Northern Territories, folded like paper. Screams rose from every corner of the great hall. Nobles jumped from their seats, chairs scraping against stone, candles flickering wildly as the wind rushed through the open windows. Elena's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but weak, fluttering like a dying bird. "Someone help him," she cried out, her voice cracking with panic. "Get the royal healer, now." But no one moved to help. Instead, the guards surrounded her, their spears pointed inward, their eyes hard with suspicion. She looked up, confused, searching the crowd for a friendly face, but all she found were accusing stares. She poured his drink, a woman's voice rang out from the crowd. "I saw her hand the cup to him myself." "Seize the healer," another voice shouted. "She has poisoned our king." Elena's mind spun. This could not be happening. Only moments ago she had been laughing with Draven, watching him lift his cup in a toast to their wedding, which was to take place the very next morning. She had loved him since the day they met, had crossed mountains and rivers to be at his side, had healed his wounded soldiers with her own 2 hands. She would never hurt him, never. "Please," she begged, turning to the guards as they grabbed her arms and yanked her to her feet. "I did not do this. I would never harm him. You must believe me." Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The captain of the guard, a broad man named Gareth, with a scar across his jaw, twisted her wrists behind her back and bound them with rope, so tight it burned her skin. "Take her to the dungeon," Gareth ordered. "Let the council decide her fate once the king wakes, if he wakes at all." Those last words struck Elena like a blade to the chest. If he wakes at all. The thought that Draven might die, and that the last thing he might remember was her hand offering him that cup, was more painful than any rope or blade could ever be. As the guards dragged her from the hall, she caught one final glimpse of him. 2 healers had rushed to his side, tearing open his collar, pressing wet cloths to his forehead. His eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. She wanted to scream his name, to run to him, to beg him to hold on, but the guards pulled her through the heavy doors and out into the cold night air before she could make another sound. The walk to the dungeon felt endless. Torches lined the stone corridors, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts against the walls. Elena's legs shook with every step, not from fear of what would happen to her, but from the terror of not knowing if Draven would survive the night. She barely noticed the guards shoving her forward, barely felt the rope biting into her wrists. All she could think about was his face, pale and lifeless, and the accusing eyes of the court staring at her as though she were a monster. They reached the lowest level of the castle, where the air grew damp and cold, and the smell of moss and old stone filled her nose. A heavy iron door creaked open, and she was pushed inside a small cell with nothing but a straw mat and a single barred window too high to reach. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the empty corridor like a final judgment. Elena sank to the floor, her back against the cold stone wall, and finally allowed herself to cry. Not loud sobs, but quiet, broken tears that slid down her cheeks in the darkness. She thought of her mother, who had taught her the art of healing before she passed, who had always told her that a healer's hands were meant to save lives, never to take them. She thought of her people, the smaller pack she had left behind to marry a king she barely knew at first, but had come to love with her whole heart. And she thought of Draven, the way he used to smile at her when he thought no one was watching, the way his voice softened whenever he spoke her name. How had it all gone so wrong so quickly? She tried to remember every detail of the feast, searching her memory for any clue that might explain what had happened. She had prepared his cup herself, from the same pitcher used to serve the other guests. She had tasted a sip from that very pitcher earlier that evening, as she always did before serving Draven, a habit born from her training as a healer, always checking for anything unusual before letting food or drink near him. She had felt nothing strange, no bitterness, no unusual taste, Someone must have tampered with the cup after she poured it. In the brief moment she had turned away to greet a guest. But who would do such a thing? And why frame her for it? Hours passed in the darkness. Elena did not sleep. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, listening to the distant sounds of the castle, the occasional footsteps of guards patrolling above, the drip of water somewhere in the corridor. Every sound made her flinch. Every silence made her wonder if Draven had already taken his last breath. Just before dawn, she heard footsteps approaching her cell, slower and heavier than the usual patrol. A key turned in the lock, and the door creaked open. A young guard stood there, his face pale in the torchlight, his eyes darting nervously toward the corridor behind him, as though checking that no one else could hear. "You should not be here," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "I know you did not do this. I saw you taste the wine before the feast began. I told the captain, but no one wanted to listen." Elena's heart leaped with a flicker of hope. "Please," she said, gripping his sleeve. "Tell me, is he alive? Is Draven alive?" The guard hesitated, glancing over his shoulder once more. "He lives," he finally said. "But barely. The healers say the poison was strong, something rare, something not easily found. They do not know if he will survive the week." Elena's breath caught in her throat. A week. She had a week, perhaps less, before the court decided her fate, before they placed the blame entirely on her and ended her life for a crime she did not commit. And even if by some miracle they believed her innocence, Draven might not live long enough to forgive her for something she never did. "Please," she said again, tears filling her eyes. "You have to help me. I need to speak with him, or with someone who can find the truth. I did not poison him. Someone else did this, and they let me take the blame." The young guard's face softened with sympathy, but he shook his head slowly. "I cannot free you. If I am caught helping you, they will accuse me too. But I will try to find out what I can. I will listen, and I will watch. If there is a truth to be found, I will help you find it." Before Elena could thank him, the sound of heavier footsteps echoed from the stairwell above. The young guard's eyes widened with fear, and he quickly stood, pulling the cell door shut and locking it just as another figure appeared at the end of the corridor. It was Gareth, the captain of the guard, his expression as hard and cold as the stone walls around them. "What are you doing down here?" Gareth demanded, his eyes narrowing at the younger guard. "Checking the prisoner, sir," the young guard replied, his voice steady, despite the fear Elena could still see flickering in his eyes. "Making sure she has not escaped or caused any trouble." Gareth grunted, clearly unconvinced, but he did not press further. Instead, he turned his attention to Elena, his gaze filled with contempt. "The council meets in 3 days to decide your fate," he said coldly. "I would advise you to make peace with whatever gods you pray to, healer. Because unless the king wakes and speaks in your defense, there will be no mercy for you." Elena forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to let him see how deeply his words had shaken her. "I did not poison him," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "And when the truth comes out, you will regret every word you have spoken to me tonight." Gareth simply scoffed and turned away, motioning for the young guard to follow him. As they disappeared up the stairwell, the young guard glanced back at her one final time, a silent promise in his eyes. Alone again in the darkness, Elena leaned her head back against the cold stone wall and closed her eyes. She thought of the first time she had met Draven, nearly 2 years ago, when his soldiers had brought a group of wounded warriors to her small village after a border skirmish. She had worked through the night, tending to wound after wound, and when the wounded began to heal under her care, Draven himself had come to see the healer who had saved so many of his men. She remembered the way he had looked at her then, not as a king looking down at a commoner, but as a man genuinely grateful, genuinely curious. He had asked her questions about her craft, about the herbs she used, about the way she seemed to know exactly what each patient needed without being told. And she remembered the way her heart had raced when he asked if she would consider joining his court as the royal healer. She had said yes, not because of his crown or his power, but because something about him, something she could not quite explain, had felt familiar, as though she had known him long before that day. Over the following months, their bond had grown deeper, their conversations lasting long into the night. their laughter echoing through the castle halls. When he had asked her to be his queen, she had cried tears of joy, never imagining that less than a year later, she would be sitting in a dungeon cell, accused of trying to kill him. The sound of dripping water continued somewhere in the darkness, marking the passage of time in slow, steady drops. Elena did not know how many hours had passed when she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with flashes of the feast, the shattering glass, and Draven's pale, lifeless face. She woke to the sound of the cell door creaking open. Sunlight, faint and gray, filtered through the small barred window, telling her that at least a full day had passed. A guard she did not recognize placed a small plate of bread and water on the floor, before quickly leaving without a word. Elena did not eat. Her stomach churned with worry, and the thought of food made her feel sick. Instead, she pressed herself close to the small barred window, straining to hear any sound from above that might tell her what was happening in the castle. She caught fragments of conversation from guards passing by outside, whispered words about the king's condition, about nobles gathering in secret meetings, about a growing unrest among the people who had heard the news of the poisoning. One phrase caught her attention more than any other. A guard, speaking low to another, mentioned a noblewoman named Cassandra Thorne, who had been seen near the royal chambers late into the night, long after the feast had ended, and long after Elena had been dragged away to the dungeon. Elena did not know much about Cassandra, only that she was a distant cousin of Draven's, from a smaller branch of the royal family, and that she had always seemed to watch Elena with a strange, calculating expression whenever they crossed paths in the castle halls. Could it be possible that Cassandra had something to do with the poisoning? Elena filed the name away in her memory, determined to remember it, to find some way to investigate further if she ever had the chance. As the second day in the dungeon dragged on, Elena found herself growing weaker, both from lack of food and from the crushing weight of uncertainty. She paced the small cell, running her fingers along the cold stone walls, searching for any weakness, any crack that might offer a chance of escape, though she knew deep down that even if she could escape, running would only confirm her guilt in the eyes of the court. No, she decided. She would not run. She would face the council, face whatever judgment they handed down, and she would fight with every breath in her body to prove her innocence. Not just for herself, but for Draven, who deserved to know the truth about what had truly happened that night. As darkness fell on the second day, Elena heard footsteps once more, softer this time, more careful. She rose to her feet, pressing close to the cell door, hoping it might be the young guard returning with news. Instead, a folded piece of parchment slid beneath the door, followed by the sound of quick, retreating footsteps. With trembling hands, Elena unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was hurried, clearly written in secret and in haste. "The king has asked to see you. Tomorrow, at dawn, before the council meets. Be ready." Elena read the words again and again, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Draven was awake. He had asked for her. But did he want to see her because he believed in her innocence, or because he wanted to look into the eyes of the woman he believed had tried to end his life? She did not know which possibility frightened her more. Through the long, sleepless hours that followed, Elena prepared herself for whatever the morning might bring. She rehearsed the words she would say, the truth she would tell, no matter how impossible it might sound. She thought of Cassandra's name, of the guard's whispered suspicions, of every small detail from the feast that she could remember. If she was going to have even a single chance to prove her innocence, she would need every piece of evidence she could gather, and she would need Draven, more than anyone, to believe her. As the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the small barred window, Elena took a deep breath and rose to her feet. Whatever happened next, whatever judgment awaited her, she would face it with the truth on her side, and with the hope that somewhere beneath his anger and pain, Draven still remembered the woman who had never stopped loving him, not for a single moment, not even in the darkest cell in his own castle. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor once more, and this time, Elena knew they were coming for her. 2 guards unlocked her cell and pulled her to her feet without a word. They did not bind her wrists this time, though their grip on her arms remained firm as they led her up the winding stone stairs, out of the dungeon, and into a part of the castle she recognized, a private hallway leading toward the royal chambers. Elena's heart raced faster with every step, her mind swirling with questions she could not answer, fears she could not silence. When they finally stopped before a heavy wooden door, one of the guards knocked twice before pushing it open. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by a few flickering candles, the curtains drawn tight against the morning light. And there, propped up against a mountain of pillows, his face still pale, but his eyes open and alert, sat Draven. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Elena searched his face desperately, looking for any sign of the man she loved, any flicker of warmth or trust. But all she found was a hard, guarded expression, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes filled with a pain that went far deeper than any physical wound. "Leave us," Draven said finally, his voice hoarse but firm, addressing the guards without taking his eyes off Elena. The guards hesitated for only a moment, before bowing and stepping outside, closing the heavy door behind them. And for the first time since the feast, Elena found herself alone with the man she loved, the man who now believed with every fiber of his being that she had tried to kill him. "Draven," she whispered, taking a small step forward, "I am so relieved you are alive. I have been praying every moment since." "Do not," he interrupted, his voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "Do not stand there and pretend to care for my life when you are the one who nearly ended it." Elena's chest tightened with pain, but she refused to back down. "I did not poison you," she said firmly. "I would never hurt you. You have to believe me." Draven's laugh was bitter, humorless. "Believe you? I watched you hand me that cup with my own eyes. I trusted you with my life, Elena. I trusted you with my heart. And within moments of drinking from that cup, I felt the poison burning through my veins." "Someone else did this," Elena insisted, taking another step closer despite the anger radiating from him. "Someone tampered with the wine after I poured it. I tasted it myself before the feast began, exactly as I always do. I felt nothing wrong. You have to let me help find the truth." "The truth," Draven repeated, his voice trembling with barely contained fury, "is that, in 3 days, the council will decide your punishment, and there is nothing I can do to stop it, not without proof of your innocence, proof I do not have." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, refusing to let him see her break. "Then let me find that proof," she said. "Give me the chance. Please, Draven. If you ever loved me at all, give me the chance to prove the truth before it is too late." For a long moment, Draven said nothing, his jaw tight, his eyes searching her face as though trying to see past the walls of anger and betrayal he had built around his heart. And then, slowly, painfully, he looked away, toward the drawn curtains, toward the faint light trying to break through the fabric. "3 days," he said quietly. "That is all the time you have." It was not forgiveness. It was not even trust. But it was a chance. A single thread of hope in the darkness. Why, and Elena knew she would hold on to it with everything she had. 3 days. Elena repeated the words in her mind as the guards led her back down to the dungeon, though this time they placed her in a slightly larger cell, one with a proper cot and a small wooden table. A change she suspected had come from Draven's quiet order, even if he refused to admit any softness toward her. She sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the stone wall, her mind racing through every possible way she could uncover the truth while trapped behind iron bars. She needed eyes and ears outside the dungeon, someone who could move freely through the castle without suspicion. Her thoughts returned to the young guard who had shown her kindness on her first night in the dungeon. She did not know his name, but she remembered his face, the fear and sympathy in his eyes when he had told her that Draven still lived. That evening, as the castle settled into its nightly quiet, Elena heard familiar footsteps approaching her cell. She rose quickly, pressing close to the bars, and was relieved to see the same young guard standing there, glancing nervously over his shoulder before speaking. "I heard you saw the king," he whispered. "Is it true he has given you 3 days?" "Yes," Elena replied, gripping the cold iron bars. "But I cannot do this alone. I need your help. What is your name?" "Oliver," the guard answered. "Oliver Bramwell. I have served the royal guard for 2 years now. My family owes a great debt to the healers of this kingdom. My younger sister survived a terrible fever only because of a healer's care. much like the care you have given to countless soldiers. I do not believe you are capable of what they accuse you of." Elena felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, Oliver. I need to learn more about a noblewoman named Cassandra Thorne. I heard she was seen near the royal chambers the night of the feast, long after I had already been taken away. Can you find out anything about her movements that night, or any reason she might want to harm the king?" Oliver's brow furrowed in thought. "Lady Cassandra," he murmured. "She is the daughter of Lord Edmund Thorne, from the Western Territories. I have heard whispers among the older guards that her family once believed they had a stronger claim to the throne, many years ago, before the current bloodline was firmly established. But that was generations past. I do not know if such old grudges could still matter today." "Old grudges have a way of surviving longer than we expect," Elena said. "Please, Oliver, find out what you can. Watch her closely, if you are able, without drawing suspicion to yourself. And if you learn anything about the poison itself, the type used, where it might have come from, that could help me as well." Oliver nodded firmly. "I will do what I can. But Elena, you must be careful. If the wrong people learn that I am helping you, we could both find ourselves in far greater danger than we already are." "I understand," Elena said, "and I am grateful for the risk you are taking." Oliver gave her a small, determined smile before disappearing back up the stairwell, leaving Elena alone once more with her thoughts. She spent the rest of the night turning over every memory of the feast in her mind, searching for any small detail she might have missed, any face in the crowd that had seemed out of place, any strange behavior she had overlooked in the chaos of the moment. She remembered greeting a group of visiting nobles from the Western Territories shortly before she had poured Draven's wine. Had Cassandra been among them? She tried to picture the faces in the crowd, but the memory was hazy, clouded by the panic and fear that had followed only moments later. The next day passed slowly, each hour feeling like an eternity. Elena paced her cell, exercised her body to keep her mind sharp, and reviewed everything she knew about poisons from her years of training as a healer. Whatever had been used against Draven had to be rare, something that acted quickly but was not immediately fatal, something that could be administered in a single cup of wine without altering its taste or color enough to be noticed. She thought of the various poisonous plants she had studied over the years, cross-referencing their symptoms with what little Oliver had told her about Draven's condition: the pale skin, the blue lips, the weakness that had persisted for days. Slowly, a possibility began to form in her mind: a rare flower, known as nightshade bloom, found only in the mountainous regions of the Western Territories, the very same territories that Cassandra Thorne called home. If she was right, it would not be definitive proof, but it would be a strong thread to follow, one that connected directly to Cassandra and her family. Elena needed to find a way to test this theory, to prove that the poison used matched the properties of nightshade bloom, and to somehow trace its origin back to the person who had truly administered it. That evening, Oliver returned once more, his expression tense with news. "I spoke with one of the healers who has been tending to the king," he said quietly. "She would not tell me everything, fearing she might be accused of sharing secrets, but she did mention that the poison seemed to slow the king's heart and weaken his blood. Symptoms, she said, she had never encountered before, not from any common poison used in these lands." Elena's pulse quickened. Did she say anything about a flower called nightshade bloom? "It grows only in the western mountains, and its effects match everything you have described." Oliver's eyes widened slightly. "I have never heard of it myself, but I can try to ask her more, carefully, without raising suspicion." "Elena, if this flower truly comes only from the Western Territories, and Lady Cassandra's family rules those very lands, this could be exactly the proof you need." "It is a start," Elena said, though she tried to temper her hope. "But the council will not accept a theory alone. We need something concrete, some physical proof that ties Cassandra directly to the poison used against Draven." Oliver thought for a moment, before speaking again. "There is something else. I noticed something strange when I was searching the records of who entered and exited the castle grounds on the night of the feast. Lady Cassandra's personal servant left through the western gate very early the following morning, before dawn, carrying a small satchel. The guard on duty at the time noted it only because it was unusual for a servant to leave so early without any stated purpose." Elena's mind raced. Where did the servant go? Do you know if he has returned? I do not know, Oliver admitted, but I can try to find out. If he was sent to dispose of evidence, or to deliver word to someone outside the castle, that could explain a great deal. Please, find out everything you can, Elena urged. We are running out of time. As Oliver left once more, Elena felt a small flicker of hope growing steadily brighter within her chest. The pieces were beginning to come together, slowly but surely, painting a picture that pointed away from her and toward Cassandra Thorne. But hope alone would not be enough to save her. She needed proof, undeniable proof, and she needed it before the council convened to decide her fate. The following morning, Elena woke to the sound of raised voices echoing from somewhere above the dungeon. She pressed herself close to the small barred window, straining to make out the words, but the voices were too distant, too muffled by stone and distance to understand clearly. Whatever was happening above, it sounded urgent, tense, filled with the kind of energy that only accompanied significant news. Hours later, Oliver returned, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly as he approached her cell. What happened? Elena asked immediately, sensing something had shifted. The king's condition worsened overnight, Oliver said, his voice heavy with worry. The healers say the poison seems to be spreading again, despite their efforts to purge it from his body. They fear he may not survive much longer if they cannot find a way to counter its effects completely. Elena's heart dropped. Has anyone tried using silverleaf extract? It is a rare herb, but it has powerful properties against certain slow-acting poisons, especially those that affect the blood and heart. I do not know, Oliver said. The healers here are skilled, but silverleaf extract is not commonly used in these lands. I have never even heard of it myself. I need to speak with the head healer, Elena said urgently. If they are using the wrong treatments, they could be making his condition worse rather than better. Oliver, please, you must find a way to get me an audience, even for just a few moments. Oliver hesitated, clearly torn between his loyalty to his duties and his growing conviction of Elena's innocence. I will try, he finally said, but I cannot promise anything. The council has grown even more suspicious of anyone showing you sympathy since news of the king's worsening condition spread through the castle. True to his word, Oliver returned later that same day, accompanied by an older woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, dressed in the simple robes of a castle healer. This is Margaret, Oliver said quietly. She has agreed to hear what you have to say, though she cannot promise to act on it without proper evidence. Margaret studied Elena carefully through the bars of the cell, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. I have heard of you, she said finally. They say you trained under a healer from the southern villages, known for unusual remedies, not commonly taught in the royal healing halls. Yes, Elena said eagerly. My mother taught me many things, including the use of silverleaf extract for treating certain rare poisons. If the king's symptoms match what I believe they do, slowed heartbeat, weakening blood, persistent weakness despite standard treatments, then silverleaf extract combined with a careful dose of cleansing herbs could help stabilize his condition while we search for a permanent cure. Margaret's brow furrowed thoughtfully. We have exhausted most conventional treatments without success. I confess, we are running out of options. If there is even a small chance your knowledge could help him, I am willing to try, though I must be very careful about how I explain this to the council. Tell them you discovered a new treatment through your own research, Elena suggested. You do not need to mention me at all. Just please, help him. That is all that matters right now. Margaret nodded slowly. Where might I find silverleaf extract? It is not something we keep within the castle stores. It grows near clear mountain streams, often alongside white river stones, Elena explained. There should be a supply in the southern healing gardens outside the castle walls, tended by the herbalists who study under my former teachers. Oliver, if you could accompany Margaret there, I believe they would recognize my name and provide what is needed. Oliver nodded firmly. I will take her there myself, tonight if possible. As Margaret and Oliver prepared to leave, a new thought struck Elena, one that tied together everything she had learned over the past few days. Margaret, one more thing. Have you examined the king's blood closely for any unusual properties? Nightshade bloom, a rare flower found only in the western mountains, produces a very specific type of poison, one that would explain everything you have described. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. I have heard of nightshade bloom, though I have never personally treated a patient affected by it. If that truly is the poison used, it would explain why our usual treatments have failed. Such knowledge is rare, known mostly to healers trained in the Western territories themselves. The words hung heavily in the air between them. If nightshade bloom truly required specialized knowledge to use effectively, it strengthened the connection to Cassandra Thorne and her family even further. Please, hurry, Elena urged. Every moment we waste is a moment closer to losing him. Margaret and Oliver departed quickly, leaving Elena alone once more in the dim cell. She sat on the edge of the cot, clasping her hands together tightly, praying with every fiber of her being that the silverleaf extract would work, that Draven would find the strength to fight off the poison long enough for the truth to come to light. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Elena did not sleep, could not sleep, her mind consumed with worry for Draven, and desperate hope that her knowledge might actually save him. She thought of all the years she had spent learning from her mother, memorizing the properties of countless herbs and remedies, never imagining that one day this knowledge might be the only thing standing between the man she loved and death itself. Just before dawn, Oliver returned, his face flushed from having run through the castle corridors, his eyes bright with something that looked almost like hope. It worked, he said breathlessly. Margaret administered the silverleaf extract just before midnight. Within hours, the king's fever broke, and his heartbeat began to steady. The healers say his condition has improved more in one night than in the previous 3 days combined. Elena felt tears of relief spring to her eyes, and this time she did not try to hold them back. Thank the heavens, she whispered. Thank you, Oliver. And thank Margaret as well. You have both given him a chance to survive this. There is more, Oliver continued, his expression growing serious once more. Margaret examined a sample of the wine residue that had been preserved as evidence. She confirmed the presence of a substance consistent with nightshade bloom, exactly as you suspected. Elena's heart raced with a mixture of vindication and renewed urgency. Then we have proof of the poison itself. Now we need to prove where it came from and who truly administered it. There is something else you should know, Oliver said, his voice dropping even lower. The servant who left through the western gate, the morning after the feast, has returned to the castle. I followed him discreetly and watched him meet privately with Lady Cassandra in the eastern gardens, away from prying eyes. I could not hear their conversation, but their manner seemed secretive, hurried. We need to find out what they discussed, Elena said firmly, and we need to find where that servant traveled during his absence. If he disposed of evidence, or retrieved more of the poison, there may still be traces we can find. The council convenes tomorrow morning, Oliver reminded her gently. We have very little time left. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breathing, forcing herself to think clearly, despite the exhaustion and fear weighing heavily upon her. Then we must use every remaining hour wisely. Oliver, can you find out where the western gate leads? What village or town lies closest along that route? If the servant traveled to retrieve more poison, or to dispose of evidence, he would have needed somewhere nearby to do so quickly, and return before dawn. There is a small village called Millbrook, about 2 hours' ride from the western gate, Oliver said. It is known for trading in rare herbs and plants from the mountain regions. That must be where he went, Elena said, a flicker of determination burning through her exhaustion. Oliver, I know I am asking a great deal of you already, but is there any way you could travel there yourself, even just to ask a few questions among the herb traders? If someone matching the servant's description purchased nightshade bloom recently, that could be the final piece of proof we need. Oliver hesitated only a moment before nodding firmly. I will go immediately. If I ride hard, I can reach Millbrook and return before the council convenes tomorrow morning. Be careful, Elena said, gripping his hand through the bars of her cell. And Oliver, thank you for everything you have done. I will never forget the risks you have taken for someone you barely know. Oliver offered her a small, tired smile. You have shown more courage and honesty than half the nobles in this castle combined. It is the least I can do to help uncover the truth. As Oliver disappeared once more up the stairwell, Elena allowed herself a small moment of hope, the first genuine hope she had felt since the night of the feast. Draven was recovering, the poison had been identified, and now, if Oliver's journey to Millbrook proved successful, she might finally have the proof needed to clear her name and expose the true culprit behind the attack. But hope, she knew, could be fragile, and the council would not wait forever. Tomorrow morning, her fate would be decided, one way or another, and she could only pray that the truth would arrive in time to save her. The council chamber was already filling with nobles by the time the guards led Elena inside, her wrists bound once more, her steps slow but steady, despite the weight of dread pressing down on her chest. Tall windows lined one wall, letting in streams of pale morning light that did little to warm the cold stone room. At the head of the chamber sat a long table where the council members gathered, stern-faced men and women, dressed in heavy robes marking their status among the kingdom's ruling families. Elena searched the room quickly, her heart sinking when she did not see Oliver anywhere among the guards lining the walls. He had promised to return before the council convened, but there was no sign of him, and the hearing was clearly about to begin without him. At the center of the head table sat Draven, still pale from his ordeal, but sitting upright, his eyes sharp and alert, despite the visible exhaustion etched into his features. Elena's heart ached at the sight of him, so weakened, yet still trying to carry the weight of his kingdom on his shoulders. Their eyes met briefly across the chamber, and though his expression remained guarded, she thought she saw something flicker there, something that had not been present during their last conversation. A shadow of doubt, perhaps, or hope. Beside him sat several council members, including an older woman with silver hair and sharp, calculating eyes, introduced as Lady Beatrice, head of the council. And a few seats away, dressed in fine blue silk, with an expression of practiced concern, sat Cassandra Thorne herself, watching Elena with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "Let the hearing begin," Lady Beatrice announced, her voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. "Elena Voss, you stand accused of poisoning our Alpha King, an act of treason punishable by death. Do you have anything to say in your defense before this council delivers judgment?" Elena straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to project a confidence she did not entirely feel. "I did not poison King Draven," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the room upon her. "I have served this kingdom faithfully as its healer for nearly 2 years. I have saved countless lives, including many soldiers who now stand loyal to this very court. I would never harm the man I love, nor betray the people I have sworn to protect." A murmur rippled through the gathered nobles, some skeptical, others uncertain. Lady Beatrice raised a hand for silence before continuing. "Witnesses claim they saw you hand the king his cup mere moments before he collapsed. How do you explain this?" "I did hand him the cup," Elena admitted, "as I have done countless times before, as part of my duties as the royal healer, always tasting the wine myself first to ensure its safety. I tasted the very same pitcher used to fill his cup that evening, and I felt nothing unusual. Someone must have tampered with his cup after I poured it, in the brief moments I turned away to greet arriving guests." "A convenient explanation," came a sharp voice from among the nobles, and Elena turned to see Cassandra rising slightly from her seat. "But where is your proof? Anyone could claim such a thing to escape justice." Elena met Cassandra's gaze directly, refusing to let the older woman's cold, calculating stare shake her composure. "I do have proof, Lady Cassandra. The poison used against the king was not a common substance. It has been identified as nightshade bloom, a rare flower found only in the western mountain territories." A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber, and Elena noticed several council members exchanging uneasy glances. Cassandra's expression remained carefully neutral, though Elena thought she saw a brief flicker of tension cross her features before she quickly composed herself once more. "An interesting claim," Lady Beatrice said slowly, "but knowledge of a rare poison's origin does not prove who administered it, nor does it clear your name from suspicion." "You are correct," Elena acknowledged. "Which is why I have been working to uncover further evidence that points toward the true culprit behind this crime." As if summoned by her very words, the heavy chamber doors burst open, and Oliver rushed inside, breathless, and disheveled from what had clearly been a long, hard ride. Several guards moved to intercept him, but he called out urgently before they could stop him. "Wait, please. I carry evidence crucial to this hearing." Draven raised a hand, silencing the guards and allowing Oliver to approach the head table, though Lady Beatrice's expression had grown sharp with suspicion. "Explain yourself," she demanded. "Who are you, and what evidence do you claim to carry?" "My name is Oliver Bramwell, a guard of this castle," Oliver said, catching his breath as he addressed the council. "I traveled to the village of Millbrook, near the western gate, to investigate a lead regarding the poison used against our king." He reached into a satchel at his side and withdrew a small leather pouch, which he placed carefully on the table before the council. "This is a sample of nightshade bloom, purchased from a herb trader in Millbrook, who confirmed selling a similar quantity to a servant, matching the description of one employed by Lady Cassandra Thorne, purchased just 3 days before the royal feast." The chamber erupted into a wave of gasps and whispered voices. Cassandra's face had grown noticeably pale, though she quickly straightened, forcing a look of outraged indignation onto her features. "This is absurd," she declared loudly. "Any number of servants could have made such a purchase. This proves nothing, except that someone is trying desperately to shift blame away from the true culprit standing accused before this council. There is more," Oliver continued, unfazed by her protests. "The herb trader also provided a written record of the transaction, including the name given at the time of purchase." He withdrew a small scroll and unrolled it before the council, revealing a name written in careful script. Elena watched as Lady Beatrice's eyes scanned the parchment, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "This name's a servant called Godwin, employed within Lady Cassandra's household." Cassandra's composure finally began to crack, her hands gripping the edge of the table tightly. "I know nothing of this. If a servant of mine acted independently, that is hardly evidence of my own involvement." "Perhaps not on its own," Draven said, speaking for the first time since the hearing had begun, his voice weak, but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the chamber instantly. "But combined with reports of your private meeting with this same servant in the Eastern Gardens, following his return from Millbrook, it paints a troubling picture, Cassandra." Cassandra's eyes widened with barely concealed panic, her gaze darting toward Oliver, then toward Elena, then back to Draven. "You cannot possibly believe I would poison my own cousin, my own king. What reason could I possibly have?" "Perhaps the same reason your family has harbored for generations," Draven said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "A belief that the throne should have passed through your bloodline rather than mine, a belief I had hoped was long buried in the past." The chamber fell utterly silent, every eye fixed on Cassandra, as her carefully maintained composure crumbled entirely. For a long, tense moment, no one spoke, the weight of unspoken accusations hanging heavily in the air. "Bring the servant Godwin before this council," Lady Beatrice finally commanded, her voice sharp with authority. "We will hear his testimony before any final judgment is made." Guards were dispatched immediately to locate the servant, while the chamber buzzed with hushed, urgent conversations. Elena felt a small measure of relief wash over her, though she knew the hearing was far from concluded. Cassandra's guilt was not yet proven beyond doubt, and until the true culprit was fully exposed, Elena's own innocence remained uncertain in the eyes of many gathered nobles. She glanced toward Draven, finding his eyes already fixed upon her, his expression unreadable, but no longer filled with the same cold anger she had seen during their last conversation. Something had shifted between them, however slightly, and she allowed herself a small flicker of hope that perhaps, despite everything, he was beginning to believe her. The wait for the servant, Godwin felt agonizingly long, though in truth, it was likely only a matter of minutes before the chamber doors opened once more, and a thin, nervous-looking man was led inside by 2 guards, his hands bound, and his eyes darting fearfully around the room. "Godwin, servant to Lady Cassandra Thorne." Lady Beatrice addressed him sternly. "You stand before this council on suspicion of purchasing a rare and dangerous poison, nightshade bloom, from a trader in Millbrook. Do you deny this accusation?" Godwin's eyes flickered toward Cassandra, who stared back at him with an expression that seemed to carry both warning and desperation. For a long moment, the servant said nothing, his body trembling visibly. Speak the truth, Draven commanded, his voice weak but firm. Your honesty here may determine whether you face judgment as a mere accomplice or as a willing conspirator in a crime against the crown itself. Godwin's resolve finally broke, tears filling his frightened eyes. I only did as I was told, he stammered. Lady Cassandra ordered me to purchase the flower from Millbrook, telling me it was needed for a private remedy she wished to prepare. I did not know, I swear I did not know, what she intended to use it for. Liar, Cassandra hissed, rising fully from her seat now, her carefully composed mask completely shattered. You knew exactly what I intended. You helped me prepare it yourself. The chamber erupted into chaos, gasps and shocked murmurs filling the air as Cassandra's own words confirmed her guilt before the entire council. Guards moved quickly to restrain her, as she attempted to flee toward the chamber doors, her desperate expression a stark contrast to the calculating composure she had maintained only moments before. You will pay for exposing me, Cassandra snarled, glaring venomously toward Elena and Oliver, as guards forced her to her knees before the council. You should have died in that dungeon, healer, and left the throne to those who truly deserve it. Lady Beatrice's expression had grown thunderous, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Cassandra Thorne, you stand confessed before this entire council of conspiring to poison our Alpha King, an act of treason against the crown itself. You will be held in the dungeon until formal sentencing can be determined. As guards led Cassandra away, still shouting furious protests, the chamber slowly settled into a stunned, heavy silence. Elena felt her legs weaken with relief, the weight of days spent in fear and uncertainty finally beginning to lift from her shoulders. Lady Beatrice turned toward Elena, her expression softening slightly, though still carrying the weight of formal authority. Elena Voss, in light of the evidence and confession heard before this council today, all charges against you are hereby dismissed. This council offers its sincerest apologies for the suffering you have endured these past days. Elena felt tears welling in her eyes, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of overwhelming emotion after days of fear and uncertainty. She turned toward Draven, finding his eyes already fixed upon her, his expression finally softening into something resembling the warmth she remembered from before that terrible night. Release her bonds, Draven ordered quietly, and guards quickly moved to untie the rope still binding her wrists. As the rope fell away, Elena took a hesitant step forward, unsure of what to say, uncertain if the trust between them could ever truly be repaired after everything that had happened. But Draven, weak as he still was, rose slowly from his seat, steadying himself against the table, and extended a hand toward her. I am sorry, he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine regret. I should have trusted you from the very beginning. I let fear and pain cloud my judgment, and I allowed you to suffer because of it. Elena crossed the remaining distance between them, taking his hand gently in her own. You were poisoned and nearly killed, she said softly. It is understandable that fear clouded your judgment. What matters now is that the truth has finally come to light. As their hands touched, a strange warmth began to spread through Elena's palm, faint at first, barely noticeable amid the emotion of the moment. But as the seconds passed, the warmth grew steadily stronger, until a soft, silvery glow began to emanate from her skin, illuminating the space between their joined hands with an otherworldly light. Gasps rippled through the chamber once more, every eye now fixed upon the glowing mark spreading across Elena's palm, an intricate pattern unlike anything she had ever seen before, delicate lines forming what looked unmistakably like a crown intertwined with a crescent moon. Draven stared down at their joined hands, his expression shifting from confusion to something that looked almost like disbelief, and then, slowly, to a dawning wonder that Elena had never seen in his eyes before. It cannot be, Lady Beatrice whispered, rising from her seat, her earlier stern composure completely forgotten. The royal mate mark. It has not appeared in this bloodline for over 3 generations. Elena stared down at her glowing palm in shock, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. What does this mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Draven finally looked up from their joined hands, meeting her eyes with an expression of pure astonishment. It means, he said slowly, as though still struggling to believe his own words, that you are not merely my betrothed by political arrangement. You are my true fated mate, bound to me by forces far older and more powerful than any crown or council. A sudden crash of shattering glass echoed through the council chamber, and every head turned toward the tall windows lining the eastern wall. A stone had been hurled through one of them, wrapped in a torn piece of cloth, landing with a heavy thud near the council table. Guards rushed forward immediately, weapons drawn, scanning the courtyard below through the broken glass, but whoever had thrown it had already vanished into the crowd gathering outside the castle gates. Lady Beatrice knelt cautiously and unwrapped the cloth from around the stone, revealing a hastily scrawled message. Her face paled as she read the words aloud. The Western territories will not stand for the imprisonment of Lady Cassandra. Release her, or face the consequences of war. Elena felt the warmth of the glowing mark on her palm fade as reality crashed back into the room, replacing the wonder of moments before with a fresh wave of danger. Draven's expression hardened instantly, the weakness in his body seeming to give way to sharp, focused authority. "Close the gates," he commanded, his voice carrying easily despite his continued frailty. "Double the guard along the eastern and western walls. I want to know exactly how many gathered outside, and whether they carry weapons." Guards rushed to obey, and within moments, the chaotic energy of the chamber shifted from shock over the mate mark to genuine alarm over the threat outside. Elena watched Draven carefully, noticing the way he swayed slightly as he tried to rise fully from his seat, the poison's lingering effects still weakening his body despite Margaret's treatment. "You should rest," Elena said quietly, moving to support him. "You are still recovering. Let your council and guards handle this threat while you regain your strength." "I cannot simply rest while my kingdom faces the possibility of war," Draven replied, though he did not pull away from her steadying grip. "Cassandra's family holds significant influence in the Western territories. If they truly rally forces against the crown, the consequences could be severe." Lady Beatrice stepped forward, her expression grave. "My king, perhaps it would be wise to send envoys to negotiate before matters escalate further. A public execution of Lady Cassandra, however justified, may only inflame tensions beyond what diplomacy could later repair." Draven considered this for a long moment, his eyes distant with the weight of difficult decisions pressing upon him. "Cassandra will face imprisonment rather than immediate execution," he finally decided. "Her crimes are severe, but perhaps mercy, tempered with firm justice, will prevent further bloodshed. Send word to her father, Lord Edmund, that I wish to negotiate terms before this conflict spreads beyond control." As the council began organizing messengers and reinforcing the castle defenses, Elena found herself pulled gently aside by Draven, away from the bustling chaos of the chamber, into a quieter alcove near the broken window. "Elena," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth she had not heard from him in days. "I know this is not how either of us imagined discovering the truth of our bond, surrounded by chaos and threats of war. But I need you to know, despite everything that has happened, I am deeply grateful the mark revealed itself when it did." Elena felt her heart swell with emotion, though the lingering fear of the threats outside kept her from fully embracing the joy of the moment. "As am I," she said softly, "though I fear our troubles are far from over." "They are not," Draven agreed grimly. "Cassandra may have acted alone in administering the poison, but I do not believe she acted entirely alone in planning it. Her family's ambitions for the throne run deep, and I suspect there may be others involved, individuals who remained hidden in the shadows, while Cassandra took the greatest risk." Elena's mind immediately turned back to the pieces of information she had gathered over the past days. The servant, Godwin, mentioned only following Cassandra's orders, but someone must have taught her about Nightshade Bloom's properties, someone with deep knowledge of rare poisons and their effects. That is not common knowledge, even among skilled herbalists. "Precisely my concern," Draven said. "I fear Cassandra may have been merely a pawn in a larger scheme, one orchestrated by someone with far greater knowledge and influence than she alone possesses." Before Elena could respond, Oliver approached quickly, his expression tense with fresh news. "My king, scouts report a significant gathering of armed forces along the western border, bearing the Thorne family banners. It appears Lord Edmund has already begun mobilizing before any formal word of negotiation could reach him. Draven's jaw tightened with barely restrained frustration. Then diplomacy may already be too late. Prepare our own forces along the border, but hold position unless directly provoked. I will not be the one to strike the first blow of war if it can possibly be avoided. As Oliver hurried away to relay these orders, Elena felt a growing sense of unease settling deep within her chest. The revelation of their bond, meant to be a moment of joy and hope, had instead ignited into the beginning of what could become a devastating conflict between kingdoms. "There is something else troubling me," Elena said slowly, turning back to Draven. "During my time in the dungeon, before Oliver discovered the connection to Millbrook, I noticed something odd about Cassandra's behavior in the weeks leading up to our wedding. She often seemed to appear wherever I happened to be, watching me with an intensity that felt more calculated than simple curiosity. At the time, I dismissed it as jealousy over my position as your betrothed, but now I wonder if she was studying me for some other purpose entirely." Draven's expression grew troubled. "Studying you how?" "I am not certain," Elena admitted, "but healers are taught to recognize patterns, subtle signs that reveal deeper truths beneath the surface. Cassandra's interest in me felt less like jealousy and more like careful observation, as though she were trying to determine something specific about me, perhaps even something related to the very mark that has now revealed itself between us." A heavy silence fell between them as the implications of her words settled in. If Cassandra somehow knew about the possibility of our mate bond before it manifested, Draven said slowly, her attempt to poison me could have been about more than simply reclaiming the throne for her bloodline. It could have been an attempt to prevent our bond from forming entirely, to eliminate either myself or you before the prophecy could be fulfilled. Elena's blood ran cold at the thought. But why would preventing our bond matter so greatly to her family's ambitions? "I do not know," Draven admitted, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. "But ancient prophecies surrounding the royal mate mark speak of a bond that brings unprecedented strength and unity to the ruling bloodline. Strength that could make any rival claim to the throne far more difficult to pursue. If Cassandra's family believed such a bond forming between us would permanently secure my reign against any future challenge, preventing it entirely might have seemed a desperate but necessary risk." The pieces were beginning to form a far larger, more dangerous picture than either of them had initially imagined. What had begun as a simple act of poisoning, seemingly motivated by ambition for the throne, now appeared to be part of a much deeper, more calculated scheme involving ancient prophecies and forces far beyond ordinary political rivalry. "We need to learn more about this prophecy," Elena said firmly. "If understanding it could help us anticipate what Cassandra's family, or whoever guides them, might attempt next, we cannot afford to remain ignorant of its full meaning." Draven nodded in agreement, though the exhaustion from his ordeal was beginning to visibly weigh upon him once more. The royal archives hold ancient texts regarding our bloodline's history, including references to the royal mate mark and its significance. Tomorrow, once I have regained enough strength, we will search them together. "You need rest tonight," Elena insisted gently, noticing the way his steps had grown unsteady despite his efforts to maintain a strong composure before his council. "The threats outside these walls are not going anywhere by morning, and you will be of no use to your kingdom if you collapse from exhaustion before you can properly address them." Draven managed a tired smile, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him since before the feast. "You have always cared for my well-being, more than I deserve, even after everything I put you through these past days." "You believe the evidence before you," Elena said softly. "I cannot fault you entirely for that, even though it caused me great pain. What matters now is that we move forward together, facing whatever challenges await us, as true partners rather than merely political allies." As Draven allowed himself to finally be led toward his chambers to rest, escorted by Margaret and a contingent of loyal guards, Elena remained behind in the council chamber, her mind still racing with questions about the mysterious prophecy and the deeper conspiracy that seemed to be unfolding around them. Lady Beatrice approached her quietly, once the chamber had mostly emptied, her expression thoughtful. "The royal mate mark has not appeared in 3 generations, as I mentioned earlier. The last time it manifested, it brought about what historians call the Great Unification, a period when three separate warring territories finally merged into the single kingdom we know today, strengthened immeasurably by the bond between the ruling Alpha and his fated mate. What happened to that bonded pair? Elena asked curiously. Do the texts describe any threats or opposition they faced? Lady Beatrice's expression grew somber. The historical records mention resistance from those who feared losing power under a unified, strengthened throne. Resistance that ultimately failed against the combined strength of the bonded pair. But the records also hint at darker forces, ones never fully identified or defeated, that opposed the bond from the shadows, forces the ancient texts refer to only as the Hollow Circle. A chill ran through Elena at the ominous name. The Hollow Circle? What do the records say about them? Very little, unfortunately, Lady Beatrice admitted. Most references were deliberately obscured or destroyed, likely by the Hollow Circle themselves to protect their secrecy. But if such forces still exist today, and if they orchestrated Cassandra's actions against you and King Draven, we may be facing a threat far more dangerous and widespread than a single ambitious noble family. Elena felt the weight of this new revelation settle heavily upon her shoulders. What had begun as a personal nightmare, wrongly accused of poisoning the man she loved, was rapidly transforming into something far larger. A battle against ancient, hidden forces that had apparently been working in the shadows for generations, waiting for the opportunity to prevent the very bond that now glowed upon her palm. We must uncover the truth about this Hollow Circle, Elena said firmly, determination hardening her resolve despite the fear coiling in her stomach. If they orchestrated Cassandra's actions, they will not simply give up after this single failed attempt. They will try again, in ways we may not yet anticipate. Lady Beatrice nodded gravely. I will have the royal archivists begin searching through every remaining record for any mention of the Hollow Circle, no matter how obscure or fragmented. In the meantime, I would advise increased caution surrounding both yourself and King Draven. If these forces sought to prevent your bond once, they may attempt more direct action, now that their initial plan has failed. As Elena finally made her way toward the chambers now assigned to her as the king's confirmed fated mate, rather than the dungeon cell she had occupied only hours before, she found her mind consumed with worry, not for herself, but for Draven, for their newly discovered bond, and for the shadowy forces that seemed determined to see that bond destroyed before it could ever fully flourish. The path ahead, she realized, would be far more dangerous than she had ever imagined when she first arrived at this castle to serve as its healer, drawn by a connection to Draven that she now understood was woven into the very fabric of fate itself. Whatever the Hollow Circle truly was, whatever their ultimate goals might be, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she would not allow them to tear apart the bond that had finally, after so much pain and fear, brought her and Draven together as they were always meant to be. A scream tore through the castle halls just before midnight, jolting Elena from a fitful sleep. She bolted upright in her new chambers, her heart pounding, the sound seeming to have come from somewhere near the healing wing, where Draven still rested under Margaret's watchful care. Without pausing to grab a robe, she rushed barefoot into the corridor, following the commotion that was rapidly growing louder. She arrived to find several guards clustered outside Draven's chamber door, their weapons drawn, their faces tense with alarm. Margaret stood among them, her hands trembling, blood staining the sleeve of her healer's robe. What happened? Elena demanded, pushing past the guards toward the doorway. Is Draven hurt? An intruder, Margaret said shakily. Someone entered through the window while the king slept. I woke when I heard movement and startled them before they could complete whatever they intended. They fled before the guards could catch them, but not before wounding me with a blade. Elena rushed past her into the chamber, her heart racing with fear as she searched for Draven. She found him sitting up in his bed, alert and tense, a small cut visible along his forearm, where he had apparently defended himself against the attack. Draven, she breathed, relief flooding through her at finding him alive and conscious. Are you badly hurt? Only a shallow cut, he assured her, though his expression remained grim. Whoever attacked me was skilled, moving with practiced precision, clearly trained for such tasks. Margaret's timely intervention likely saved my life. Elena moved quickly to examine his wound, relieved to find it indeed shallow, requiring only basic treatment rather than the more urgent care his poisoning had demanded days before. But her mind raced with troubling questions, even as her hands worked methodically to clean and bandage the cut. This was no random attack, she said, voicing the fear that had been building since Lady Beatrice's revelation about the hollow circle. Whoever sent this assassin knew exactly where to find you, knew the layout of the castle well enough to approach undetected until Margaret's intervention. An inside connection, then, Draven said grimly. Someone within these walls provided information to whoever ordered this attack. Oliver arrived moments later, breathless from having searched the castle grounds. We found tracks leading toward the eastern wall, but they vanished near the outer forest. Whoever attacked tonight had a horse waiting, already prepared for a swift escape. This confirms careful planning, Draven said, his jaw tight with barely restrained anger. Cassandra's arrest was clearly not the end of this threat, but merely the beginning. As dawn broke over the castle, the council convened once more, this time in a smaller, more secure chamber, deep within the fortress walls. Lady Beatrice presided grimly over the gathering, her expression carrying the weight of sleepless hours spent already searching through ancient records. "I have found fragments of information regarding the Hollow Circle," she announced without preamble. According to the oldest surviving texts, they were originally a secretive alliance among several noble families who opposed the unification of the territories generations ago, fearing the loss of their individual power and influence. When the first royal mate mark appeared and secured the unified throne's strength, those who opposed it did not simply disappear. They retreated into secrecy, passing their opposition down through generations, waiting patiently for another opportunity to prevent history from repeating itself. And they believe preventing our bond, or eliminating one of us, could weaken the throne enough to finally act against it, Draven concluded grimly. Precisely, Lady Beatrice confirmed. Though the exact families involved in the original Hollow Circle remain unclear from the texts I have found so far, the pattern of their actions closely mirrors what we have witnessed with Cassandra's actions, and now this attempted assassination. Elena's mind raced through everything they had learned. If Cassandra was merely a pawn, as we suspected, someone taught her about Nightshade Bloom's properties, someone with deep knowledge of both poisons and the significance of the royal mate mark itself. That level of knowledge suggests someone with access to information not readily available to most nobles, even those from prominent families. The royal archives themselves, Draven said slowly, realization dawning across his features. Very few individuals hold access to the deepest historical records, those detailing the significance of the mate mark and the ancient threats surrounding our bloodline. If someone from within the castle itself provided Cassandra with this knowledge, they would need such access. Lady Beatrice's expression grew troubled. Only a handful of individuals hold such access, myself included, along with the head archivist and a small group of trusted advisors who have served the crown for many years. Then we must investigate each of them carefully, Draven said firmly. Without alerting them to our suspicions if possible. If someone among your most trusted advisors has been secretly working against the crown for years, perhaps even generations, we cannot afford to move carelessly and risk them fleeing before we can uncover the full truth. As the council began discussing methods to quietly investigate those with access to the sensitive archives, Elena found her thoughts drifting toward Cassandra, still imprisoned within the castle dungeons following her confession. If anyone might hold information about who had truly guided her actions, it would be Cassandra herself, assuming she could be persuaded to reveal the truth. "I would like to speak with Cassandra," Elena said, interrupting the ongoing discussion. She confessed to administering the poison, but she may know more about who guided her, who taught her about Nightshade Bloom and its properties. If we can learn even a small piece of information from her directly, it could help narrow our search significantly. Draven considered this for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I will accompany you. If Cassandra sees us together, perhaps witnessing the strength of our bond firsthand will help her understand that whatever cause she believed she was serving has already failed." Later that morning, guards led Elena and Draven down into the dungeon, the same cold corridors where Elena herself had spent days trapped in fear and uncertainty only a short time before. They found Cassandra in a cell near where Elena had once been held, her once elegant appearance now disheveled, her eyes carrying a haunted, exhausted look that spoke of long hours spent contemplating her fate. "Come to gloat?" Cassandra asked bitterly as they approached, though her voice lacked the venomous confidence she had displayed during the council hearing. "We have come for answers," Draven said firmly. "Someone taught you about Nightshade Bloom. Someone guided your actions against me. We know you did not act entirely alone in planning this attack." Cassandra's eyes flickered with something that looked almost like fear, quickly masked behind a bitter, defensive expression. "I have already confessed my role. What more could you possibly want from me?" "The truth," Elena said, stepping forward despite the guard's cautious hesitation. "Cassandra, whoever guided you likely cares nothing for your fate now that your plan has failed. They used you, manipulated your family's old grievances to serve their own hidden purposes. If you help us identify them, perhaps mercy could still be extended in your sentencing." For a long moment, Cassandra said nothing, her gaze dropping to the cold stone floor of her cell, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never met them directly," she admitted. "All communication came through carefully coded letters, delivered by a servant I did not recognize, who always vanished before I could learn anything about them. They promised that if I succeeded in preventing your bond from forming, my family's claim to the throne would finally be restored, with their support." "Did these letters carry any identifying marks?" Draven asked urgently. "A seal? A particular style of handwriting? Anything that might help us trace their identity?" Cassandra hesitated, before nodding slowly. Each letter carried a small symbol at its bottom, a circle with a hollow center, drawn in silver ink. I did not think much of it at the time, assuming it was simply a personal mark of whoever guided me. Elena's heart raced at this confirmation. "The hollow circle," she breathed. "It is real, and it is indeed responsible for guiding your actions." "What is the hollow circle?" Cassandra asked, genuine confusion crossing her exhausted features. "I have never heard that name before." "An ancient, secretive alliance, opposed to the unification of our territories," Draven explained. "They appear to have manipulated your family's old ambitions to serve their own hidden agenda against my throne and the mate bond that has now formed." Cassandra's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like horror. "Then I was truly nothing more than a pawn in their scheme, exactly as you suspected. All my family's hopes for reclaiming influence over the throne were merely tools for their own purposes." "Do you still have any of these letters?" Elena asked urgently. "Even a single remaining letter could provide crucial evidence, perhaps even reveal something about their identity or location." Cassandra shook her head slowly. "I was instructed to burn each letter immediately after reading it, to prevent exactly this kind of discovery. I am sorry. I truly have nothing left to offer as proof." Despite the lack of physical evidence, Elena felt a renewed sense of determination settling within her. They now had confirmation that the hollow circle was indeed real, actively working to undermine Draven's throne and prevent their bond from strengthening the kingdom against future threats. And they had a symbol, a hollow circle drawn in silver ink, something concrete to search for, as they continued investigating who among the castle's trusted advisors might be secretly working against the crown. As they left the dungeon, Draven's expression carried a mixture of determination and lingering worry. "We need to move carefully from here," he said. "If the hollow circle has infiltrated our own castle, watching our every move, they will know soon enough that Cassandra has revealed what little she knew about them. We must anticipate their next action before they can strike again." "Perhaps we can use this to our advantage," Elena suggested thoughtfully. "If they believe we know very little, they may grow overconfident, careless in their next attempt. We should be cautious about revealing exactly how much we have learned, allowing them to underestimate us, while we continue searching for their true identity." Draven nodded slowly, appreciation evident in his gaze as he looked at her. "You have a sharp mind for strategy, beyond even your skills as a healer. Together, I believe we stand a strong chance of uncovering this threat before it can cause further harm to our kingdom." As they made their way back toward the main castle halls, Elena felt the weight of their growing bond, both the mystical connection marked upon her palm and the deepening trust and partnership forming between them through shared adversity. Whatever the hollow circle truly intended, whatever forces they commanded from the shadows, Elena knew that facing this threat together, as true partners bound by fate itself, gave them a strength that no hidden conspiracy could easily overcome. But as they walked, Elena could not shake the unsettling feeling that they were being watched, that somewhere within these very walls, eyes loyal to the hollow circle observed their every move, waiting patiently for the next opportunity to strike against the bond that threatened to unite the kingdom beyond their reach forever. Elena woke with a gasp, her entire body drenched in cold sweat, her heart pounding as though she had just run for miles. The dream had felt so real, Draven lying motionless on cold stone, a hollow circle carved into the ground beneath him, silver light draining from his body into the darkness surrounding them. She sat upright in her bed, breathing hard, trying to shake the lingering terror of the vision from her mind. A soft knock came at her door moments later, and she opened it to find Draven himself standing there, his expression tense and urgent. "I felt something," he said without preamble. "Through our bond, a wave of fear so intense, it woke me from sleep. Elena, what happened?" Elena stared at him in astonishment. "I had a nightmare, a vision of you lying motionless within a hollow circle, carved into stone. You felt that, through our bond?" Draven nodded gravely. "The mate bond connects us in ways we are only beginning to understand. If you experienced a vision of danger, we should not dismiss it lightly, especially given everything we have learned about the hollow circle these past days." Before Elena could respond further, urgent footsteps echoed down the corridor, and Oliver appeared, his expression grim. "My king, forgive the intrusion, but Lady Beatrice requests your presence immediately. The head archivist has been found dead within the royal archives." Elena's blood ran cold. The head archivist, one of the very individuals who held access to the sensitive historical records regarding the royal mate mark and the ancient threats surrounding their bloodline. They hurried together toward the archives, finding Lady Beatrice already there, her expression pale with shock, as she stood over the body of an elderly man sprawled across the stone floor, surrounded by scattered scrolls and overturned shelves. "He was discovered only moments ago by a servant delivering his morning meal," Lady Beatrice explained, her voice unsteady. "There are no obvious wounds, no signs of struggle beyond the scattered records. It appears he may have been searching for something specific before he died." Elena knelt carefully beside the body, examining him with her healer's trained eye. She noticed a faint discoloration around his lips, similar in some ways to what she had observed in Draven following the poisoning, though clearly a different, perhaps more potent substance. "He was poisoned," she said quietly. "The symptoms suggest something fast-acting, likely administered very recently, perhaps even while he searched through these very records." Draven's expression darkened further as he surveyed the scattered scrolls and torn pages littering the floor around them. Someone silenced him before he could reveal whatever information he may have uncovered, or perhaps before he could report something suspicious he had already discovered. Lady Beatrice knelt beside a partially burned scroll near the archivist's outstretched hand, carefully lifting it to examine what remained of its contents. "This appears to be a genealogical record, tracing several noble bloodlines through multiple generations. I recognize a few names, but much of it has been destroyed." Elena leaned closer to examine the surviving fragments, her eyes catching on a small symbol drawn near the bottom of the scroll, a circle with a hollow center, matching exactly what Cassandra had described from the coded letters she received. "Draven, look," Elena said urgently, pointing toward the symbol. This confirms the archivist was investigating the hollow circle himself, likely searching for information about their identity or history within these very genealogical records. "He must have discovered something significant," Draven said grimly, "important enough that someone felt compelled to silence him permanently before he could share his findings with us." As Lady Beatrice carefully gathered the remaining fragments of scattered records, hoping to piece together whatever information had survived the apparent attempt to destroy them, Elena's mind raced through the implications of this new attack. The hollow circle was not merely watching from the shadows, waiting patiently for opportunities to strike. They were actively working within the castle itself, willing to kill anyone who threatened to expose their true identity. "We need increased security around everyone, with knowledge of this investigation," Draven declared firmly. "Lady Beatrice, Oliver, Margaret, and Elena herself, all of you now stand at risk, given your involvement in uncovering the truth behind Cassandra's actions and the broader threat of the Hollow Circle. What about you? Elena asked, worry evident in her voice. You have already survived one assassination attempt. If the Hollow Circle grows desperate enough to silence even a loyal archivist, they may attempt something even more direct against you. I will take every precaution, Draven assured her, though his expression remained grim. But we cannot allow fear to paralyze our investigation. If anything, this attack confirms we are drawing closer to uncovering the truth, close enough that they feel compelled to take increasingly desperate measures to stop us. Over the following days, the castle fell into a tense, watchful atmosphere, guards patrolling every corridor with heightened vigilance, servants and nobles alike whispering nervously about the mysterious death of the head archivist, and the growing sense that some hidden threat lurked within their very walls. Elena found herself rarely alone, always accompanied by either Oliver or a contingent of trusted guards, a necessary precaution given the escalating danger, though one that left her feeling increasingly restless and confined. Late one evening, as she sat within the royal archives herself, carefully sorting through the surviving fragments of records that Lady Beatrice had managed to salvage, Elena's eyes caught on a partially legible passage that made her breath catch in her throat. "Draven," she called out urgently, and he appeared quickly from where he had been reviewing separate documents nearby. "Look at this. It mentions a specific location, a place called Ravenswood Hollow, referenced alongside the symbol of the Hollow Circle, multiple times throughout these fragments." Draven leaned closer, examining the faded script carefully. Ravenswood Hollow. I have never heard of such a place, though the name itself seems to carry an unsettling significance, given everything we now know. Lady Beatrice, who had been working nearby, quickly joined them, her expression brightening with cautious hope. "I believe I recall something about that name from older maps within these archives. A small, largely forgotten territory, located deep within the northern forests, abandoned generations ago, following some unrecorded conflict. If the Hollow Circle originated from, or perhaps still maintains a presence within, this abandoned territory, it could serve as the key to finally uncovering their true identity and location," Draven said, a renewed determination hardening his features. "We should investigate it directly," Elena suggested, though she could see the concern immediately crossing Draven's face at the suggestion. "It could be extremely dangerous," he cautioned. "If this location does indeed serve as a base for the Hollow Circle, traveling there directly could expose us to significant risk, precisely the kind of danger that seems to have already claimed the life of our head archivist. But if we do not investigate, we may never uncover the truth needed to finally end this threat," Elena countered firmly. "Draven, we cannot allow fear to prevent us from pursuing the very answers that could protect our kingdom, and our bond, from whatever the Hollow Circle intends next." After a long moment of consideration, Draven finally nodded slowly, though his expression remained heavy with concern. "If we pursue this, we do so carefully, with a small, trusted group, rather than a large, conspicuous force that could alert the Hollow Circle to our approach. Oliver, Margaret, Lady Beatrice, and a handful of our most loyal guards should accompany us, nothing more." Plans began forming quickly over the following days, careful preparations made in secrecy to avoid alerting whoever within the castle might still be secretly working with the Hollow Circle. Elena spent hours studying whatever maps and records Lady Beatrice could locate, referencing the northern forests and the abandoned territory of Ravenswood Hollow, memorizing every detail that might prove useful during their journey. On the night before their planned departure, Elena found herself standing alone on a small balcony overlooking the castle grounds, the cool night air, a welcome relief after days spent confined within tense, watchful corridors. Draven joined her quietly, wrapping a warm cloak around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Are you frightened?" he asked softly, studying her expression carefully in the moonlight. "Yes," Elena admitted honestly, "but I am more frightened of allowing this threat to continue growing unchecked than I am of facing whatever dangerous awaits us at Ravenswood Hollow." Draven's expression softened with admiration. "You possess a courage I have rarely witnessed, even among the most seasoned warriors within my own guard. Whatever we discover on this journey, I am grateful to face it alongside you, as true partners bound not merely by fate, but by choice as well. Elena leaned into him gently, drawing comfort from his steady presence, despite the uncertainty and danger that awaited them. Together, she agreed softly, we will uncover the truth behind the hollow circle, and we will ensure that whatever threat they pose to our kingdom finally comes to an end. As dawn broke the following morning, their small group departed quietly through a lesser-used gate on the northern side of the castle, disguised as simple travelers rather than the royal party they truly were, beginning their journey toward the forgotten forests and the mysterious secrets awaiting them within Ravenswood Hollow. An arrow whistled past Elena's head, so close she felt the wind of its passage against her cheek, before embedding itself deep into the trunk of a nearby tree. She dropped instinctively to the forest floor, her heart slamming against her ribs as chaos erupted around their small traveling party. "Ambush!" Oliver shouted, drawing his sword as more arrows rained down from the dense tree line surrounding the narrow forest path they had been following for 2 days. "Take cover." Draven pulled Elena roughly behind a large boulder as their guards scrambled to form a defensive perimeter, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the shadowy forest for the source of the attack. Margaret and Lady Beatrice huddled together nearby, both women pale with fear but otherwise unharmed. "How many attackers?" Draven demanded, his voice tight with controlled urgency as he shielded Elena's body with his own. "Difficult to say," one of the guards called back, his eyes darting through the trees. "At least 6, perhaps more, positioned along both sides of the path." Another volley of arrows struck nearby, one grazing the shoulder of a young guard who cried out in pain, but managed to maintain his position. Elena's healer instincts immediately kicked in despite the danger, and she moved to assist him, applying pressure to the wound, even as chaos continued to swirl around them. "They knew we were coming," Draven said grimly, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. "This was no random bandit attack. They were waiting for us specifically, along this exact path." Elena's blood ran cold at this realization. If the Hollow Circle had somehow learned of their planned journey toward Ravenswood Hollow, it meant their earlier suspicions had been correct. Someone within the castle itself continued providing information to these hidden enemies, despite all their careful precautions to keep their journey secret. "We need to fall back," Oliver called out, deflecting an arrow with his shield as he moved to cover Lady Beatrice and Margaret. "This position is too exposed. There is a rocky outcropping further down the path that could provide better defensive cover." As their group began a careful, fighting retreat toward the suggested cover, Elena caught sight of movement through the trees, dark-clad figures emerging from the shadows, weapons drawn, clearly intent on ensuring their small party did not survive this encounter. She counted at least 8 attackers now, far more than the initial estimate, moving with the coordinated precision of trained fighters rather than common bandits. A sharp cry drew her attention as one of their guards fell, an arrow finding its mark despite his defensive efforts. Elena rushed to his side, despite Draven's protective grip trying to hold her back, her healer's instincts overriding her own fear for personal safety. "I have to help him," she insisted, pulling free from Draven's grasp and dropping beside the fallen guard, quickly assessing the wound and applying pressure to slow the bleeding. "Elena, you are exposed," Draven warned urgently, positioning himself protectively between her and the approaching attackers, his sword raised despite his still recovering strength from the poisoning. The clash of steel rang out as their remaining guards engaged the approaching attackers directly, desperate combat erupting along the narrow forest path. Elena worked as quickly as she could, stabilizing the wounded guard enough that he could be moved, while chaos continued to rage around them. Suddenly, one of the dark-clad attackers broke through their defensive line, moving directly toward where Elena knelt, his blade raised with clear murderous intent. Elena froze for a single terrified moment, unable to move quickly enough to defend herself. Draven moved with desperate speed, intercepting the attacker just before the blade could find its mark, his own sword clashing violently against his opponent's weapon. Despite his weakened condition, Draven fought with fierce determination, driven by the need to protect Elena from harm. The battle that followed felt like an eternity to Elena, though in truth, it likely lasted only a few tense, chaotic minutes. Draven fought valiantly, eventually managing to disarm his opponent and force his surrender, while their remaining guards gradually gained the upper hand against the other attackers, several of whom fled back into the forest rather than face continued combat against the king's skilled defenders. As the immediate danger finally subsided, Elena rushed to Draven's side, relief flooding through her at finding him alive, though breathing heavily from the exertion of combat so soon after his recovery from poisoning. "Are you injured?" she asked urgently, her hands already moving to check him for any wounds. "Only exhausted," Draven assured her, though his pale complexion suggested the battle had taken a significant toll on his still recovering strength. "We need to interrogate the surviving attacker before he can attempt to escape or take his own life, to avoid revealing information." The captured attacker, a rough-looking man with hard, defiant eyes, refused to speak initially despite Oliver's firm questioning. It was only when Lady Beatrice produced the fragment of scroll bearing the hollow circle symbol, holding it directly before the prisoner's face, that his composure finally cracked. "You already know too much," he spat bitterly. "Killing you here would have prevented far greater troubles than whatever punishment I now face for failing my mission." "Who sent you?" Draven demanded, his voice carrying the full authority of his position despite his exhausted state. "Who within my own castle provided information about our journey?" The man's eyes flickered with something that looked almost like fear, though he remained stubbornly silent for several long moments before finally speaking. "I do not know their true names. We receive orders through coded messages, delivered by messengers who never reveal their identities. All I know is that we were instructed to prevent your party from reaching Ravenswood Hollow at all costs." "Then Ravenswood Hollow truly does hold significance to the Hollow Circle," Elena said, exchanging a meaningful glance with Draven. "This confirms we are on the right path, despite the danger." As their guards secured the prisoner for transport back toward the nearest garrison, and Margaret worked to treat the wounded guard's injuries more thoroughly, Draven pulled Elena aside, his expression heavy with concern. "This attack confirms that continuing our journey carries significant risk," he said quietly. "Perhaps we should reconsider, return to the castle, and find another way to investigate the Hollow Circle's activities, without exposing ourselves to such direct danger." Elena shook her head firmly, despite the lingering fear still coursing through her veins from the recent battle. "If we turn back now, we may never uncover the truth needed to finally end this threat. And returning to the castle carries its own dangers, given that someone within its walls continues providing information to our enemies. At least here, in the open forest, we know exactly what threats we face." Draven studied her for a long moment, clearly torn between his protective instincts and recognition of the wisdom in her words. "You are right," he finally admitted. "Turning back now would only delay the inevitable confrontation, while allowing the Hollow Circle more time to prepare further schemes against us. We continue forward, but with even greater caution than before." Lady Beatrice approached, her expression thoughtful despite the recent chaos. "I have been considering our attackers' words. If they received specific orders to prevent us from reaching Ravenswood Hollow, it suggests something significant awaits us there, something the Hollow Circle desperately wishes to keep hidden from discovery. Perhaps evidence of their true identities," Oliver suggested, rejoining the group after ensuring their remaining guards had secured the immediate area against further attack. "Or perhaps something even more significant, related to the ancient prophecy surrounding the royal mate mark itself." Elena's mind raced through the possibilities, though exhaustion from the recent battle made clear thinking increasingly difficult. "Whatever awaits us there, we need to proceed with extreme caution. If they were willing to risk direct confrontation to prevent our arrival, they will likely have additional defenses prepared at the location itself." As their group prepared to continue their journey, now moving with heightened vigilance and careful attention to their surroundings, Elena found herself walking close beside Draven, drawing strength and comfort from his steady presence, despite the exhaustion and lingering fear from their recent encounter. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting me during the attack. I know you are still recovering, and yet you fought without hesitation." Draven's expression softened as he glanced toward her. "I would face any danger to protect you, Elena. Our bond has shown me a depth of connection I never fully understood before, and I refuse to allow the Hollow Circle to tear that away from us, no matter what sacrifices such protection might require." As twilight began settling over the dense forest surrounding them, their small, battle-worn party pressed onward toward Ravenswood Hollow, each step carrying them closer to whatever dark secrets awaited within the forgotten territory. Secrets that Elena felt certain would finally reveal the true nature of the ancient threat, determined to see their fated bond destroyed before it could ever fully flourish. The ruins rose suddenly from the mist, ancient stone towers half swallowed by twisted roots and creeping vines, their broken silhouettes casting long, jagged shadows across the forest floor in the fading afternoon light. Elena felt an immediate chill run through her body, unrelated to the cool northern air, as their party finally reached the edge of Ravenswood Hollow after 3 additional days of careful, watchful travel. "This place feels wrong," Margaret whispered, drawing her cloak tighter around herself as they studied the crumbling structures from the tree line. "Even the birds have gone silent here." Draven's hand moved instinctively to the hilt of his sword as he surveyed the abandoned territory before them. "We proceed carefully, staying together at all times. Oliver, take 2 guards and scout the perimeter before we move any closer to those ruins." As Oliver departed with his small scouting party, Elena found her eyes drawn to a large stone archway standing at the center of the ruins, still remarkably intact despite the surrounding decay, carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer strangely in the dim light. She recognized, with a jolt of unease, the hollow circle symbol repeated multiple times throughout the carved patterns. "This must be significant," she said, pointing toward the archway. "The symbol appears everywhere throughout this structure." Lady Beatrice studied the ancient carvings with growing fascination despite her evident unease. "These markings appear far older than I initially expected, predating even the original conflict that led to this territory's abandonment. Whatever purpose this archway once served, it appears deeply connected to the origins of the hollow circle itself." Oliver returned within the hour, his expression tense. "The ruins appear deserted on the surface, but I discovered signs of recent activity, fresh footprints, and what looks like a hidden entrance beneath the largest structure at the center of the complex." They approached cautiously, weapons drawn, senses alert for any sign of ambush, as they made their way through the crumbling ruins toward the central structure Oliver had identified. Beneath a partially collapsed section of flooring, they discovered a hidden stairway leading down into darkness, clearly maintained despite the abandoned appearance of the surface ruins above. "This confirms the hollow circle still uses this location," Draven said grimly, peering down into the shadowy depths. "We proceed with extreme caution from here." Torches were lit, and their party descended slowly into the darkness below, the air growing increasingly cold and damp as they made their way deeper beneath the ruins. The stairway eventually opened into a vast underground chamber, illuminated by strange, flickering blue flames, burning within stone braziers, positioned around the room's perimeter. At the center of the chamber stood a large stone table, covered with scattered documents, maps, and what appeared to be ceremonial items arranged in careful patterns. Elena's breath caught as she recognized several documents bearing the same handwriting style described by Cassandra, coded messages marked with the hollow circle symbol. "We have found their base of operations," Draven said quietly, moving carefully toward the table to examine the scattered documents. Before they could investigate further, a cold, measured voice echoed from the shadows surrounding the chamber. "I must admit, I did not expect you to survive the ambush along the forest path. You have proven far more resilient than anticipated." Elena spun toward the sound, her heart racing as a figure emerged from the darkness at the far end of the chamber, dressed in flowing dark robes, their face obscured by a deep hood. Something about the voice, however, struck Elena as strangely familiar, though she could not immediately place where she had heard it before. "Show yourself," Draven demanded, positioning himself protectively in front of Elena as their guards moved to surround the mysterious figure. The hooded stranger laughed softly, a sound devoid of genuine warmth, before slowly lowering their hood to reveal their face. Elena gasped in shock as recognition finally struck her, the features unmistakable despite the passage of years since she had last seen this particular face. "Lady Beatrice," Elena breathed, turning in confusion toward the older woman standing beside her, only to find Lady Beatrice's own expression frozen in similar shock. But the figure before them was not Lady Beatrice herself. It was someone who bore a striking resemblance to her, features so similar they could only belong to close family. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," the stranger said with cold amusement. "I am Cordelia Ashworth, sister to Lady Beatrice, though she has long claimed I died many years ago during what she believed was a tragic accident. In truth, I have spent those years building the hollow circle into the force it is today, waiting patiently for the opportunity to finally reclaim what should have always been mine." Lady Beatrice's face had gone deathly pale, her hands trembling visibly as she stared at her supposedly deceased sister. "Cordelia, this cannot be. I watched them recover your body from the river myself, all those years ago." "A carefully staged deception," Cordelia replied smoothly, "necessary to allow me the freedom to work from the shadows without suspicion. You always were too trusting, dear sister, too quick to accept convenient explanations rather than questioning deeper truths." Draven's expression had hardened with dawning understanding. "You have been guiding the hollow circle from within our own castle walls all along, using your sister's position and trust to gather the very knowledge needed to orchestrate these attacks against us." "Precisely," Cordelia confirmed, a cruel smile spreading across her features. "My dear sister's access to the royal archives proved invaluable over the years, allowing me to study every detail of the ancient prophecy surrounding the royal mate mark, and to identify exactly how such a bond might be prevented from ever fully manifesting." "But you failed," Elena said firmly, stepping forward despite Draven's protective instinct to shield her. "The mark has already appeared. Our bond is already formed, regardless of your schemes against us." Cordelia's smile faltered slightly, though her composure remained largely intact. "A minor setback, though not an insurmountable one. The prophecy speaks not merely of the mark's appearance, but of its full manifestation through a ceremony of binding that must occur within a specific window of time following its initial appearance. If that ceremony fails to take place, the bond will weaken and eventually fade entirely, leaving your throne as vulnerable as it has always been." Elena felt a chill of fear at this revelation, glancing quickly toward Draven, whose expression had grown equally troubled. "How much time remains before this window closes?" "Very little," Cordelia said with cold satisfaction, "which is precisely why I felt confident enough to reveal myself to you now, knowing that even should you somehow escape this chamber, you would not possess sufficient time to complete the necessary ceremony before your bond's power fades entirely." "Then we will simply have to prove you wrong," Draven said firmly, his sword raised as he prepared to confront Cordelia directly. "Surrender now, and perhaps some measure of mercy might still be extended toward you." Cordelia laughed coldly, raising her own hand to reveal a small vial containing a swirling, dark liquid. "I think not. You forget. I have spent years studying poisons far more potent than the nightshade bloom my foolish niece attempted to use against you. This particular concoction would end your life within moments, long before any healer could hope to intervene." Elena's blood ran cold as Cordelia's threat hung heavily in the tense silence of the underground chamber, every member of their party frozen, uncertain how to proceed without provoking Cordelia into unleashing whatever deadly substance she held within that ominous vial. "Lower your weapons," Cordelia commanded, her voice carrying an icy authority as she gestured toward their guards with the vial still clutched threateningly in her other hand. "Or I promise you, this chamber will become the final resting place for your beloved king." Draven hesitated, his sword still raised, his eyes calculating the distance between himself and Cordelia, clearly weighing whether he could close the gap quickly enough to prevent her from using the poison before their guards could intervene. "Do not test me," Cordelia warned, noticing his calculating gaze. "I assure you, I would rather see him dead than allow your bond to fully manifest and secure your throne beyond any hope of my family reclaiming its rightful influence." Elena's mind raced desperately, searching for any possible solution that might diffuse the immediate danger without risking Draven's life. Her eyes fell upon the scattered documents covering the stone table nearby, and a sudden idea began forming despite the terror gripping her heart. "Wait," Elena called out, stepping forward slightly despite Draven's warning glance. "Erdelia, before you do anything rash, I have a question. If the ceremony of binding must occur within a specific window of time, and you have already revealed this information to us, What exactly do you hope to achieve by threatening us now? If Draven dies, does that not simply hasten the very outcome you claim to fear, my grief driving me to complete whatever remains of our bond through different means? Cordelia's expression flickered with brief uncertainty, clearly not having anticipated this particular line of questioning. The bond requires both participants alive and willing, she said, though her voice carried slightly less confidence than before. His death would end any possibility of the bond's completion entirely. Then perhaps, Elena continued carefully, her mind working quickly to formulate a plan, you might consider a different approach entirely. Your true grievance lies with your sister, does it not? A lifetime spent in the shadows while she received recognition and trust within the royal court. Perhaps there remains a path toward addressing that grievance, without resorting to further bloodshed. Lady Beatrice, understanding Elena's strategy, stepped forward slowly, her expression carrying genuine sorrow, despite the danger of the situation. Cordelia, whatever happened between us all those years ago, I never intended for you to feel so cast aside. If you truly faked your death out of desperation, rather than malice, perhaps we could still find a way to address whatever wrongs you believe were done to you, without further violence. For a long, tense moment, Cordelia's resolve seemed to waver, her eyes flickering between her sister and the vial still clutched in her trembling hand. You cannot possibly understand what it felt like, she said, her voice cracking slightly with long suppressed emotion. Watching you rise within the court, gaining trust and influence, while I remained forgotten, dismissed as merely your lesser shadow. I never saw you that way, Lady Beatrice said softly, taking another careful step forward. Cordelia, please, put down the poison. We can find another way forward, together, as sisters once more. The vulnerability in Cordelia's expression seemed to grow, her hand trembling more visibly, as old wounds and buried emotions clearly warred within her against years of carefully cultivated resentment and ambition. For a moment, Elena believed they might truly reach her, might convince her to abandon this destructive path before further harm could occur. But then, Cordelia's expression hardened once more, her eyes growing cold and determined. It is too late for such reconciliation, she said firmly, though her voice still carried a faint tremor of unresolved emotion. I have sacrificed too much, built the hollow circle into too significant a force, to abandon our purpose now over sentiment. Just as she began to raise the vial threateningly once more, Oliver, who had quietly circled around the perimeter of the chamber during the tense conversation, lunged forward suddenly, knocking the vial from Cordelia's hand before she could act. It shattered against the stone floor, the dark liquid within splashing harmlessly across the ancient stones, rather than finding its intended target. Chaos erupted as several hooded figures, previously hidden within the shadows of the chamber, revealed themselves and rushed forward to defend Cordelia. Draven moved quickly to intercept the nearest attacker, while their guards engaged the remaining Hollow Circle members in fierce, close-quarters combat. Elena found herself pulled quickly behind the stone table by Margaret, both women watching helplessly as the battle raged around them, praying desperately for Draven's safety amid the chaotic combat. She watched as Draven fought with renewed strength and determination, clearly fueled by the adrenaline of the moment despite his still recovering condition from the earlier poisoning. Cordelia, seeing her forces beginning to falter against the skilled royal guards, attempted to flee toward a hidden passage at the rear of the chamber. Lady Beatrice, moving with surprising speed despite her age, intercepted her sister before she could escape. Cordelia, please, Lady Beatrice pleaded desperately, grasping her sister's arm firmly. This ends now, one way or another. Do not force me to choose between my duty to the crown and whatever love remains between us as sisters. Cordelia struggled briefly against her sister's grip, before finally, exhausted and defeated, her resistance crumbled entirely. Tears began streaming down her face, as years of buried resentment and grief finally broke through her carefully maintained composure. I never wanted it to come to this, she admitted brokenly. I only wanted to matter, to be seen as more than merely your shadow. As the remaining Hollow Circle members were subdued or fled into the darkness of the underground tunnels, Draven approached, breathing heavily from the exertion of battle, but otherwise unharmed. He studied Cordelia carefully, his expression a complex mixture of anger and something that looked almost like understanding. "Your grievances, whatever their origin, do not excuse the harm you have caused," he said firmly. "The attempted poisoning, the death of our head archivist, the ambush along the forest path, these are crimes that demand justice, regardless of whatever personal pain drove you toward them." "I understand," Cordelia said quietly, her earlier defiance completely extinguished, replaced now by a weary resignation. "I will accept whatever judgment you decide is appropriate." As their guards moved to secure Cordelia and the few remaining Hollow Circle members who had not managed to escape into the tunnels, Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her, though it was tempered by the awareness that Cordelia's earlier warning about the ceremony of binding still hung over them. "We need to return to the castle immediately," she said urgently, turning toward Draven. "If what Cordelia said about the time limit is true, we cannot afford further delay in completing whatever ceremony is required to fully secure our bond." Lady Beatrice, though clearly still processing the emotional weight of confronting her long-lost sister, nodded firmly in agreement. "The ancient texts I have studied do reference such a ceremony, traditionally performed before witnesses within the royal court, involving a formal exchange of vows and a ritual blessing meant to fully bind the mate mark's power." "Then we must return quickly," Draven agreed, already moving to organize their party for the journey back toward the castle. "Whatever time remains, we cannot afford to waste it." As their group began the return journey, now burdened with prisoners, as well as the weight of everything they had learned within the depths of Ravenswood Hollow, Elena found herself walking beside Draven once more, her hand finding his amid the exhaustion and lingering adrenaline of their recent confrontation. "We have uncovered the truth behind the Hollow Circle," she said softly. "But the danger is not yet fully past. We still must complete this ceremony before our bond's power fades entirely." Draven squeezed her hand gently, his expression carrying a mixture of exhaustion and quiet determination. "Then we will ensure it is completed in time. Whatever challenges remain ahead of us, Elena, we will face them together, exactly as we have faced everything else since that terrible night of the feast." As their party pressed onward through the forest, racing against time toward the castle and whatever ceremony awaited them there, Elena allowed herself a small measure of hope that after everything they had endured, the truth finally uncovered, and the greatest threat against them finally confronted, they might yet find their way toward the peaceful future she had always dreamed of sharing with the man she loved. The castle gates loomed ahead as their exhausted party finally emerged from the forest, 6 days of hard travel etched into every weary face among them. Elena's legs ached with every step, but the growing urgency pressing against her chest gave her renewed strength as they hurried through the courtyard toward the main hall, where Lady Beatrice had already sent word ahead, requesting the royal advisors and priests gather immediately upon their arrival. "How much time do we truly have left?" Elena asked, her voice tight with anxiety as they moved quickly through the castle corridors. Lady Beatrice consulted a small, weathered text she had carried carefully throughout their journey, one of the few surviving records detailing the ancient ceremony. According to these texts, the window traditionally lasts no longer than 7 days following the mark's initial appearance. Today marks the 6th day. Elena's heart raced with fresh panic. "Then we have only until tomorrow to complete this ceremony." "It appears so," Lady Beatrice confirmed grimly. "We must prepare everything necessary tonight, so the ceremony can be performed at dawn tomorrow, before the window closes entirely." Draven, despite the exhaustion clearly weighing upon him from their long journey and the battle at Ravenswood Hollow, immediately began issuing commands to the castle staff, arranging for the great hall to be prepared, for the royal priests to be summoned, and for word to be sent throughout the kingdom, announcing the ceremony that would take place the following morning. "What exactly does this ceremony require of us?" Elena asked, following Lady Beatrice toward the royal archives where the older woman intended to study the surviving texts more thoroughly before nightfall. "A formal exchange of vows before witnesses, spoken not merely as promises of marriage, but as an acknowledgement and acceptance of the bond itself," Lady Beatrice explained, carefully unrolling another ancient scroll across the reading table. "Following the vows, a ritual blessing must be performed, traditionally involving a mixture of rare herbs and a ceremonial flame, meant to symbolize the joining of two souls into one unified strength." Elena listened carefully, memorizing every detail despite the mounting fatigue threatening to overwhelm her after days of danger and difficult travel. And if we fail to complete this ceremony before the window closes? Lady Beatrice's expression grew somber. The text suggests the mark itself would begin to fade, the bond's power diminishing gradually until it disappeared entirely, leaving you both as you were before, connected merely through your original betrothal, rather than the deeper strength of a true mate bond. The weight of this knowledge settled heavily upon Elena, as she helped Lady Beatrice gather the necessary herbs and ceremonial items required for the following morning's ritual. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive that night, her mind racing through every possible complication that might yet threaten their chances of completing the ceremony successfully. As the first gray light of dawn began filtering through her chamber window, Elena rose from her restless bed, allowing Margaret and several attendants to help her prepare for the ceremony ahead. She dressed in flowing robes of deep blue, embroidered with silver thread that seemed to catch and reflect the early morning light in delicate, shimmering patterns. When she finally emerged into the great hall, she found it transformed overnight, adorned with countless candles and fresh flowers, the assembled court, and visiting nobles filling every available space, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope after the recent turmoil that had gripped the kingdom. At the center of the hall, before a raised dais, stood Draven, dressed in formal ceremonial attire, befitting his position as Alpha King, his expression carrying both exhaustion from their recent ordeals and a deep, unwavering determination as his eyes found hers across the crowded chamber. Elena moved slowly through the parting crowd, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and profound hope, until she finally stood before him, close enough to see the warmth reflected in his tired but steady gaze. The royal priest, an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, stepped forward to begin the ceremony, guiding them through the ancient words required to formally acknowledge and accept their bond before the assembled witnesses. Do you, Draven Ashford, Alpha King of this unified kingdom, accept the bond fate has woven between yourself and Elena Voss, promising to honor and protect this connection as the foundation of your strength, both as king and as mate? I do, Draven said firmly, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. I accept this bond fully, promising to honor and protect it, and the woman who holds my heart, for as long as I shall live. The priest turned toward Elena, repeating similar words, and she felt her voice steady, despite the weight of the moment. I do, she said clearly. I accept this bond fully, promising to stand beside Draven as his true mate, offering my strength, my healing, and my unwavering love, for as long as I shall live. As their vows concluded, the priest lifted a small ceremonial bowl containing the carefully prepared mixture of rare herbs Lady Beatrice had gathered, along with a small ceremonial flame burning steadily within a shallow dish beside it. Join your hands, the priest instructed gently, and speak together the final words of binding, as recorded within the ancient texts of our kingdom's founding. Draven and Elena clasped hands, the familiar warmth of the mate mark already beginning to stir faintly against her palm as they spoke the final ceremonial words together, their voices blending in perfect unison despite having only recently learned them. Bound by fate, strengthened by choice, our souls entwined as one, our kingdom's future secured through this sacred bond, now and forevermore. As the final words left their lips, the mate mark upon Elena's palm blazed to life with brilliant silver light, far more intense than its first appearance during the council hearing, the glow spreading rapidly across both their joined hands and traveling up their arms in delicate, shimmering patterns that mirrored the ancient symbols they had discovered within the ruins of Ravenswood Hollow. Gasps of wonder rippled through the assembled crowd as the light continued to grow, illuminating the entire hall with a warm, radiant glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their joined heartbeats. Elena felt a profound sense of completion wash over her, a deep, unshakable connection settling into place within her very soul, as though some final piece of herself had finally found its way home. Draven's eyes, when she finally looked up to meet his gaze, carried the same overwhelming emotion she felt within her own heart, a mixture of relief, joy, and profound love, that transcended anything she had experienced before this moment. As the light gradually faded, leaving behind only the faint, permanent shimmer of the completed mate mark upon her palm, the assembled court erupted into cheers and applause, the earlier tension and fear that had gripped the kingdom finally giving way to genuine celebration. Lady Beatrice approached them once the initial celebration had settled slightly, her expression carrying both relief and lingering sorrow, likely still processing the difficult revelations regarding her sister's betrayal. "The bond has been fully completed," she confirmed, examining the shimmering mark with evident satisfaction. "Your kingdom now stands strengthened beyond any threat the Hollow Circle, or any other opposing force, might attempt against it." "What will happen to Cordelia?" Elena asked gently, aware of the complicated emotions such a question likely stirred within Lady Beatrice. "She will face judgment for her crimes," Lady Beatrice said, though her voice carried genuine sorrow. "Though I have asked King Draven to consider mercy where possible, imprisonment rather than execution, given the circumstances that drove her toward such destructive choices." Draven, who had been listening quietly nearby, nodded firmly. "Justice will be served, but mercy will be considered as well. Cassandra and Cordelia both acted from places of deep pain and misguided ambition, rather than pure malice alone. Their punishment will reflect both the severity of their crimes and the circumstances that led them toward such choices." As the celebration within the Great Hall continued around them, Elena found herself pulled gently aside by Draven, away from the bustling crowd, toward a quiet alcove near one of the hall's tall windows, where morning sunlight streamed through in warm, golden beams. "We have finally reached the end of this difficult journey," Draven said softly, taking both her hands in his own, the shimmering mark now permanently etched upon her palm. "Thank you, Elena, for your strength, your wisdom, and your unwavering love throughout everything we have faced together." "We faced it together," Elena corrected gently, "exactly as fate always intended, and I have no doubt that whatever challenges the future might yet bring, we will continue facing them side by side, as true partners bound not merely by an ancient mark, but by a love I believe was always meant to be." As Draven leaned down to press a gentle, tender kiss against her lips, sealing their bond with one final, quiet moment of intimacy amid the celebration surrounding them, Elena felt a profound sense of peace settle over her heart, the fear and uncertainty of the past days finally giving way to a hopeful, promising future stretching out before them. A kingdom united, a bond fully secured, and a love that had proven strong enough to overcome even the darkest conspiracies determined to see it destroyed. The kingdom, at last, could look forward to a future of unity and strength, its alpha king and his true mate standing together, ready to face whatever challenges still lay ahead, bound eternally by fate, by love, and by the glowing silver mark that would forever remind them of everything they had overcome to finally find their way to one another.